The last segment I discussed the 16th Amendment and how it departed from the philosophy of the founders and has led us in part to our current federal overreach. In this segment, I want to discuss the other amendment that departed from the philosophy of the founders and has done much damage to our republic. I'm talking about the 17th Amendment. It states in part, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof. Well, what's so bad about that? It's democratic, isn't it? Isn't that good? Well, let's see. How were senators chosen previously? The original method stated in Article 1, Section 3 said, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the legislature thereof. One of the main themes of the Constitution is checks and balances. The founders intentionally made the choice of senators different from the House, which has always had elections by the people, so there would be a balance of what they call sympathies. The House would be sympathetic to the people, and the Senate would be sympathetic to the states, providing a good balance between the two. I want to give some historical context to the makeup of the Senate. During the Constitutional Convention, one of the most contentious debates was the makeup of Congress. The debate was, should Congress be made up of representatives based on population or on equal basis for each state? Of course, smaller states wanted equal representation, and the larger states wanted representation based on population. Each thought their interests would be abused if the other plan was adopted. In addition to the small state, large state division, there was also a division of those who wanted a more centralized government and those who wanted to keep the federation of states that existed under the Articles of Confederation, where the states remained totally sovereign. What is interesting is that almost everyone agreed on a bicameral legislature. In other words, that there should be 2 houses of Congress. Why? What was so important about 2 houses? Remember, I talked about their desire for checks and balances. They wanted to set up a Congress with 2 houses so that they would have 2 bodies that would each give checks and balances to the other. But in order to do that, each must have different interests or sympathies. This would be somewhat similar to the British system with the House of Lords and the House of Commons, each representing their interest of a different type of constituents. If both houses had the same sympathies, they wouldn't really be a check on the other. By giving the states equal representation in the Senate, the Connecticut Compromise appeared to give the states a significant role in checking and balancing power in the national government. But in order to give the states the real power to check the House, the states needed to have primary control of the Senate. How would that be accomplished? By having the state legislatures elect or appoint the senators. Only in this way would the states have true representation in Congress. This not only appealed to the small states, but also to those who wanted to keep the Union a federal system, again with the states retaining their sovereignty and most of the power. Listen to Joseph Story again, who was actually one who wanted a more centralized government. In his commentaries on the Constitution, he describes the need for a different election process of senators. He said, if each branch is substantially framed upon the same plan, the advantages of the divisions are shadowy and imaginative, the visions and speculations of the brain, and not the walking thoughts of statesmen or patriots. In this view, the organization of the Senate becomes an inestimable value. It represents the voice not of a district, but of a state, not of one state, but of all, not of the interest of one state, but of all, not of the chosen pursuits of a predominant population in one state, but of all the pursuits in all the states. George Mason believed that the appointment of senators by state legislatures would give the citizens of states, quote, some means of defending themselves against encroachments of the national government. Fisher Ames thought of the United States senators as, quote, ambassadors of the states. Madison wrote in Feller 62 that, quote, the appointment of senators by state legislatures gives to state governments such an agency in the formation of the federal government as must secure the authority of the former. Well, how did this work out in reality? Throughout our history, state legislatures did not hesitate to instruct U.S. senators on how to vote. In fact, the very first instruction that was given to them was to meet in public. The Virginia and Kentucky resolves of 1798 were the work of state legislatures that instructed their senators to oppose the Sedition Act, which they believed was unconstitutional. State legislatures were instrumental in Andrew Jackson's famous battle with the Bank of the United States, which ended with the bank being defunded. State legislatures throughout the United States instructed their senators to oppose the Bank of the United States in the Senate. Senator Kellogg Sprague of Maine was forced to resign in 1835 after ignoring his legislature's instruction to vote against the bank. The U.S. Senate voted to censure Andrew Jackson for opposing the bank, but the states responded by forcing 7 other senators to resign for taking part in that vote. Unfortunately, this great principle of the Senate representing the interests of the states was destroyed by the 17th Amendment. Why was the amendment passed? It was a result of the progressive era, which touts democracy as the end of all politics. Of course, remember, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Of course, when you hear the word progressive, just substitute communist or socialist to get the real philosophy behind the change. The direct election of senators was said to be more democratic and therefore would reduce, if not end, corruption. However, the real source of corruption today is our so-called democracy, where people vote for senators that will continue to give them handouts from the government. The 17th Amendment has helped destroy the power of the states and allow the federal government to grow out of control. Now senators have no allegiance to the state legislature and generally do what they want with little danger of not being reelected. By changing the election process, we now don't have a proper balance in Congress. This, along with the 16th Amendment, has destroyed the power of the states, which were supposed to retain all the power not delegated to the national government. This is just one more reason the federal government has been able to get away with the massive overreach of powers the last 100 years. Oh, by the way, do you know what years these 2 amendments were passed? They were both ratified the same year, 1913, during the Wilson administration, a Democrat. It was a very bad year for our republic.